20th anniversary. I think those are my opening remarks, such as they are. Glad you're here. I do want to, of course, not forget to mention our sponsor, Brand Networks. You're going to hear from them at lunch. I was going to say this noon, but we never have lunch at noon. It's at, I think, 12:45. And we'd be delighted if you stick around and hear from them. We're very thankful for their sponsorship and support of this event. Okay, so I want to call up now our programmer and your moderator for this morning's show, a man named Ross Fadner, who bears a slight resemblance to me 40 years ago or so. And here he is, Ross Fadner.
Thank you, Ken Fadner. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Almost Social. As Ken said, I'm Ross Fadner, and I'll be your host this morning. And as he also mentioned, this is the first Almost Social MediaPost has done since May 2014. Why did we wait so long? Well, a couple of reasons. One, MediaPost evolves its events business as the industry evolves. So there's a reason, you no longer see the likes of OMA ad nets or OMA performance anymore. Not that there are no longer such things as ad networks or performance marketing, but we felt the industry has evolved away from the necessity of doing a one-day show about these topics. OMA performance was also kind of too broad of a name for what really is a giant topic anyways. And so it has kind of come to be with social marketing. Social media is so pervasive in our lives now that talking about social marketing practices in a vacuum is almost too broad. It's kind of like talking about everything a marketer does. There's social listening, CRM, paid social advertising, owned and earned media, data collection, interpretation, targeting, segmentation. And that's all inside each social media platform, which are all kind of their own worlds. Now, it's not as if social media has become as staid as something like, say, search, because how you approach these insular worlds changes as the rules and practices change. But increasingly, all the best technology partners for each of these disciplines kept getting scooped up by the big marketing cloud providers. So we felt we were looking at a situation whereby major advertisers only had a few places to turn for help with social media and its worlds. Now, that's not to say that the cloud providers are perfect. They are not. But social media had become so diffuse that brands and agencies required these one-stop shops to kind of help them manage these worlds. So we decided to shelve Almost Social. Well, for a while, anyway. Now, why have we brought it back? Well, some big things have happened in social media since 2014. One, influencer marketing has emerged as a huge new opportunity that advertisers are watching closely. Much of today's show will cover how brands can leverage influencer marketing on the different platforms and how these partnerships actually work. Two, giants like Facebook and Twitter have made huge innovations in both their platforms and business models, which means new opportunities, changes, challenges for brands and agencies that they almost get a hold of. Three, the rise to prominence of Snapchat, Instagram, and live streaming, apps like Twitter's Periscope and Facebook Live, have all created a new set of brand new worlds for marketers and consumers to engage in. Conveniently, we're going to touch on all these subjects at the return of Almost Social today. Social media is now riding what we're calling its third wave, and that is really, in a nutshell, why we brought this show back. Long may it live. As I've noted repeatedly, social media platforms are their own worlds, so much so that advertising inside of them is but one component that you as advertisers and marketers should take note of. It's still quite important, however. And with that in mind, we begin the day today with a paid social story from peer-to-peer e-commerce site Etsy, who will take us through the ways in which the brand successfully reaches new customers and re-engages existing ones through paid social. The first session is an interview. I'll be conducting it, so please put your hands together. Welcome to the stage, Samantha Druss, Etsy's Senior Digital Marketing Specialist. She likes to be called Sammy, by the way, and we're all going to be familiar here, so we're going to call her Sammy. Hi, Sammy. How are you today?
Hi. Good. How are you, Ross?
I'm good, thank you. Very good, thanks. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what you do for Etsy?
Sure. I'm a senior specialist at Etsy, which pretty much I plan and strategize new initiatives on expanding our brand globally in terms of digital marketing across a variety of channels and strategies.
Okay. Beyond social media or mostly on
Social media as well as display in general,
Okay.
and online
Cool.
video, all the above.
So since we're talking about social today, can you just give us a sort of broad overview of Etsy's social strategy, sort of everything that falls under it, and then your responsibility specifically?
Sure. So we see social strategy as a huge opportunity. Etsy's fairly new to social media. We only started running paid ads on Facebook at scale at the end of last year. Also, Etsy has really grown pretty organically in terms of social. We haven't really been doing a lot of advertising in the past, and we've extended our team quite significantly. So when I started working there, my team was pretty much one of the first teams to really expand our Etsy positioning in the advertising space.
Cool. Great. So what were your goals when you started buying social inventory?
Yeah, our goals were ultimately conversions, but with the mindset of social, it's slightly different than search. We're not reaching users who are raising their hands with their intent to purchase. So our goals was conversions, but really establishing that intent to purchase directly. So being able to reach the right users with the right ads at the right time to initiate that intent so that they eventually make that path to conversion.
And how are you doing these buys? Were they direct or programmatic or?
In terms of just in general for paid display?
Yeah, for paid display.
Yeah. Since we're fairly new, it's working with the big players for right now. So mainly focusing on Facebook initiatives and Instagram initiatives.
What strategies did you deploy to reach the goals that you set out?
Yeah, we've tested a variety of strategies, but in terms of specific channels and different types of ad products that Facebook and other platforms provide, it's using carousel ads and using display ads to pretty much advertise our variety of products to our right audiences. So when thinking of strategy, it's understanding who your audience is, making sure that you're not honing in on too small of an audience so that you don't exhaust that audience based on budget, but then also looking at a wider audience to offer that expansion of opportunity. It's also important determining the content in order to reach those relevant users. So looking at targeting, looking at audience scale, and looking at content are the main.
So what channels and what formats are particularly effective at drawing the conversions that you were?
Yeah, so in terms of conversion focus, carousel ads have performed pretty well for us. We see a huge opportunity in Facebook dynamic product ads, especially as an e-commerce site. And then in terms of leveraging other assets such as video and video within carousel units, those help with more of the upper funnel strategies.
Okay. So what did overall success look like? What were the engagement metrics that were most useful in drawing these conversions?
Yeah, we looked at sales, we looked at site activity, seeing what people, how many people were coming to our site and what they were doing once they landed on our site, and also looking at the search impact from our awareness ads.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you learn, and try to be specific about your audience and how people are using social channels?
Yeah, so audience, I think, is a key factor in establishing the performance of campaigns. Once determining your strategy, it's really about, when you're first new to social advertising, going after the lowest hanging fruit, as those are the users who are most likely to convert the fastest. So using lookalike audiences, since these people have already shown qualities that make them, or that tell us that they do want to start purchasing items. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But it's going after the lowest hanging fruit, but then making sure that you don't exhaust that audience. So after that lowest hanging fruit, then looking at more interest-based targeting for prospecting. And not only that, it's not just about Etsy's audience, it's about what Etsy's audience is doing on these social platforms. How are they engaging with our ads? So when we connect to these users on social channels, whether through Pinterest or Facebook or Snapchat, what is the content we can offer them to make them initiate that intent to purchase, to inspire them, to get them to want to engage with our brand. So that's the main concept we're looking at.
Great. What kind of testing and techniques did you use, and what kind of learnings did you get from doing that?
With social constantly advancing in their technology and ad products and offerings, we're constantly learning different things from each campaign we run, whether it's certain targeting silos that worked best, or certain creative variations, knowing our audience, creating the right content for our audience. In terms of the creative content, it's building for mobile first, making sure that we're capturing attention within 3 to 5 seconds of that user seeing the ad. Users scroll through Facebook so quickly, and no one really has that attention span anymore, since we're shifting pretty much platforms give us, or I guess really just learning from, without that attention span, it's engaging and capturing that audience as quickly as possible to stop their thumb.
Okay. So how did your paid social efforts kind of evolve over time? I mean, where did they start and where are they today? What's the difference?
So we started with the safest bet. So leveraging retargeting, going after the lowest hanging fruit. And then as we expanded and evolved, we tweaked our audiences to prospect and to expand into broader targeting efforts. And with that, pretty much align our content to that. And in terms of like strategy, for example, with Facebook, ad relevance, the ad relevance of your content on Facebook really determines your win rate through the bidding structure. So it's ensuring that that's as strong as possible to capitalize on performance.
So did any of your learnings, like specifically, like do you have an example where you maybe changed tack or had to change things or?
So originally we would run campaigns where we would put multiple different ad variations within a campaign, and we noticed that Facebook's algorithm works in a way where it'll determine quickly maybe the 2 best performers that are most relevant to the audience we're targeting. But then maybe the remaining 10 of those ads won't get a lot of spend behind it. And as our campaign continued, there was still the budget was still mainly focused on those 2 ads. So started doing to ad set, same targeting parameters, the same strategies, so that we can then pinpoint with similar budgets across each of these ads what was performing best and how to learn from that. And not just that, it's optimizing towards certain creative and seeing what's driving the most efficient cost per purchase and stuff like that.
Okay. And talk a little bit about your own and earn efforts on social media. And I know that's not necessarily what you do, but how do they inform the paid social efforts?
So Facebook significantly changed from the past few years, and a lot of other channels are following suit as well in their capabilities. With earned media, it's kind of what Facebook was like a few years ago, where it was all about fan acquisition and fan engagement and connecting with users who are already hand raisers for your brand. And now with paid media, so in that case, we see earned media as more of a community builder and more of a retention strategy. But then looking at owned media and paid media, it's prospecting and really capturing those new users. Audiences are really broad and you can reach all of them on Facebook. So it's capturing people who may not know of Etsy, but showing them what Etsy is.
So are you going to evolve your messaging sort of accordingly based on the stuff that you're finding? In other words, more upper funnel campaigns, is that like in the pipeline for you?
Yeah, actually just a couple weeks ago, we launched a more brand awareness campaign, which has been very different than what we've been doing in the past, which has been more conversion focused. With this brand awareness campaign, we're understanding we're understanding the reality of our global opportunity. And with that, we want to communicate our brand position to make sure it's understood across all markets. We've been around for 11 years, and we want to use that success to really communicate what Etsy stands for. And it's not just really about supporting only our buyers, but it's also supporting our 1.7 million sellers. And this campaign, really the intent there is brand awareness, so that we can really establish our brand position and make sure it's communicated globally. And oh yeah.
When does it start? Or
it started a couple weeks ago.
a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Any early learnings, or is it too new?
Yeah. So we are looking in terms of early. Well, first the campaign is difference makes us. So with the messaging, it's elaborating that everyone has different ideas, like different styles. So it's really showcasing that Etsy, there's an item for anyone. And what we saw from a performance standpoint so far is looking at completed video views. Facebook just added even a new metric, which is ad recall lift. We're also, it's still really new to tell, but we're seeing a lot of reaction to our videos, which has been great so far. And we also have some Nielsen studies running right now, so we're looking forward to those results too.
Great. Cool. So does Etsy pair the data it garners from paid social with like outside sources, outside of social media, like search or email or anything?
Does it pair? Sorry.
How does it work with data collected from other sources?
Yeah, we look at a variety of opportunities. We are very focused on data, and we look at them separately. It's more reaching users at different times. For example, on search, these are people who have already shown that intent, whereas for Facebook, it's looking at those audiences with the intention to establish that intent.
Okay. So what's going to be next for Etsy with respect to paid social? Are you going to move outside of Facebook and try new platforms?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of opportunity, and we know it, and I think we're constantly keeping up with all the new products and new opportunities that social channels are offering. We're really keen on testing with Snapchat and do see opportunity there. With Pinterest, we also see great opportunity. A lot of our users are big Pinterest fans. In terms of strategy and measurement, Pinterest is more of a discovery brand, so the conversion path there tends to be a little longer than what we've seen on Facebook. But nowadays, I think social channels are becoming directly comparable to programmatic partners and other display vendors. So especially with their data and their optimization. And now that Facebook actually started not selling their their remnant inventory to third-party vendors, the only way you can buy on Facebook is directly through Facebook. So that is
that a good thing?
Continue to be our priority. It's a good thing for now. For us, for publishers, and for other partners, it may not be such a good thing. But it's important to keep transparency in mind too, and making sure you're also relying on your internal data as well, and not just what Facebook tells you, being the whole video message.
So with respect to some of the other platforms that we were mentioning, like Snapchat and Instagram and things like that, are there any brands out there that you admire what they're doing on those channels?
Yeah, there's a lot, and we're constantly looking at competitors and seeing the opportunity there. It's always helpful. I guess a lot of advertisers like to see other people test new platforms first before they move forward, and I think we're a little bit of both. But we do want to make sure we know what we're measuring and we know what we're getting going into the campaigns.
Great. So is there any advice you'd give to marketers that are new to social media and paid social in particular? that you would give to someone who's really seriously looking at starting a paid social campaigns?
Yeah, I would say data is key, and really understanding the platform and reading case studies and understanding the opportunities each of these channels have, and knowing your audience and making sure your audience is comparable to your budget. If you have a significant budget but you want to reach a very, very specific target, that's not the most efficient way to go usually. So knowing what to balance, and also understanding that in these channels, content is key and content is priority. People are now going on these channels for content specifically. So to engage them and connect with them, in order to do that, you have to deliver that content as a brand as well.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sammy. I would like to open up to questions from the audience if there are any. The mic is coming. Give us a second. The question right there, Rob. Or do you need this mic? Oh, you need a new mic. Okay. Right in the back there. When you ask a question today, folks, if you could just stand, please tell us where you work and what your name is, obviously.
Ross, we have to stand.
You don't have to stand.
Okay.
I mean, sorry. You don't have to
I'm not on
Sorry.
stage, you are here.
Yeah. I'm sitting.
I'm Liberty. I'm from Liberty Interactive Marketing. Sammy, thanks for the rundown on Etsy's social here. Just something in my mind, were you guys using dynamic remarketing to start? And I'm just curious about how you structured your campaign, specifically on Facebook, because Etsy's not like ModCloth where they're just selling vintage clothing. I mean, there's tons of categories. Right. So I was just curious how you prioritized and then how you structured your audience targeting.
Yeah, that is constantly challenging, especially since we're a marketplace supporting both sellers and buyers, so we don't always control the inventory that we're running in our ads. But in terms of strategy, dynamic product ads we haven't tested yet, but we're looking to. It does require a lot of tech support on the back end, but we're getting there, which is really exciting. But it's really what we started doing initially was just focusing in on that low-hanging fruit target and making sure we were tying content with specific occasions and initiatives to really establish that intent and demand. So using more carousel ads, since they had that inventory also to display more product that really had a higher chance of being relevant to more people.
Question in front here, Rob.
Do any of your sellers pay co-op to you for placement in that advertising, or do you make all the decisions on the featured products?
We see social channels as more of a global Etsy support brand, just supporting both sellers and buyers overall. Yeah, so not yet.
That was Lori Peterson, by the way, a good friend of MediaPost. Don't forget to say your name.
Hi, Lori. We can take another question before we move on. If there is one. If there isn't, we can move along. All the way in the back. I'm gonna really turn to see that.
Hi, Sabrina Heiss with Newton Living. I know you said that part of what you look at for your conversions is video views and length of view. Mm-hmm. Based on the latest news from Facebook reporting, how has that changed how you'll be looking at your previous results for historical data?
Lucky for us, did you want to say something?
No. I said thanks for that.
Yeah. Lucky for us, we haven't been running a lot of video prior to that. We only started a couple weeks ago. So we have been more conversion focused, looking at more cost per purchase and more lower funnel metrics. In terms of video views now, Facebook's started adding additional metrics, such as now you can measure 100% completed views as opposed to what Facebook qualifies as a view, which is 3+ seconds. So we're looking at cost per 100% completed view and calculating the view through ourselves as well by looking at views over total impressions and not necessarily the views Facebook measures. So that's why I think it's really important to make sure you're looking at your own data as well, and not just relying on publisher data.
That doesn't have third-party measurement. Great. Well, Sammy, thanks so much for
Ross,
is there another
can we
one?
squeeze in one more real quick?
We could, yeah. Go ahead.
Just a quick one. Jenna Milet with NutriClick. I'm curious about your targeting specifically. You've mentioned interests, but do you do anything with behaviors?
Yeah, so interest, I think, includes a variety of behaviors, but we'll also, based on our strategy, I think what's performed best by far has been lookalike targeting. And in terms of interest, if we want to reach very niche users, it's also looking at purchase-based targeting as well in terms of like understanding what users are doing offline. And Facebook has all of those partnerships, which makes them a beast in the industry as well.
Great. Well, all right. Well, thank you, Sammy. Thanks for joining us. Are you going to stick around for a little bit longer in case people have more questions, or do you have to take off? Okay, a few minutes. Okay. All right, thanks. So next, folks, we're going to ask the next panel to start coming up to the stage, but we're going to have to take a minute or two to sort the stage out, and then I'll be back with you in 1 minute. Maybe you want to get a coffee or something. Thanks, Sammy. Give her a round of applause. Ambly, the SVP of Content Marketing for Pop, an agency whose client roster includes Nike, Starbucks, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Adobe. Please welcome to the stage Joe and his panel.
Yes. No, not at all. Hi, how are you?
Okay, it's a little early. Is everybody ready?
Hello.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe McCambling, and I head up content marketing for a digital agency in Seattle named Pop. And what I'm going to do today is I'm setting a timer for 25 minutes starting now, and we'll stop in 25 minutes so that we can take questions from the audience. And if you don't have questions, I've got plenty more that I can ask. But I'm really excited about this panel because like all of you here, I'm very interested in influencer marketing. I think I know something about it, but I know that I have a lot to learn, and I can't think of a better panel in terms of teaching us what we need to know. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, and Jocelyn, we're going to start with you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Davis. I'm excited to be here, so thank you. And I work at Defy Media, specifically in the Clever brand. I've been at Clever since day one, back in the digital dark age of 2008. So it's been really exciting to see how influencer marketing and really just the digital space has grown. I'm an executive producer over the brand, as well as a host, and sometimes I make cheese plates and do people's hair. And I mean, we're digital, so we're still getting our hands dirty, but that's my primary role.
So Jocelyn's being a little bit modest. See, her content has generated, at least the last time I checked, well over 2 billion views. So very, very influential. And we were having a conversation before we came up on stage about Jocelyn was a contestant in the
Amazing Race.
The Amazing Race. I'm sorry, my mind went blank. And you were talking about how nervous some of the contestants were about the way they would be viewed. And do you remember what you told me?
Yeah, so the season I was on was all social media influencers, and even then, people were concerned about how they would come across in these really intense situations because the show really brings out all sides of you, even the not pretty sides. And after doing what I've been doing at Clever for so long, and I am very cognizant. I do think about what I'm putting out there, whether it's Snapchat or YouTube or whatever. But now that's just a part of me. I'm not afraid to be in those tough situations because I really do trust myself. That said, editing is still a girl and boy's best friend. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of what we do is that we are real. We're not these cookie cutter, always polished people. We are serving up who we are, and I think that's why we've been able to accrue over 2 billion views.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Holden?
So I work with Jocelyn.
Yeah.
I have the pleasure of doing that, which is amazing, because when you get someone, an influence of her side, it's easy to take into market and put in front of clients.
Right.
So I work for Defy. I head up our integrated marketing efforts, pretty much pairing all of our influencers and our talent and our brands with the ad marketplace. So, you know, we have the kind of distinction of how we do things. Is we actually have our brand. So Jocelyn is an employee of Defy.
Right.
She's an employee of Clever, therefore an employee of Defy, which makes it much easier. So we try, and she's very modest, but she's behind the camera, she's in front of the camera, right? And so
Right.
we work to kind of build brands around folks like Jocelyn and other influencers and really develop IP, so that's shows, new channels. So where we started Smosh 10 or now 11 years ago, we developed Smosh Games, Smosh Second Channel. We just brought in a year and a half ago 4 or 5 new influencers to that group. Who have thrived and now have the biggest show on Smosh. So it's my job really to help tell the story in the marketplace and try to figure out with brands like who is the right fit and how can we execute within our IP.
Now, some of us in the audience have been part of agency mergers, and oftentimes they don't work out because cultures don't really fit very well. How do you bring in someone like Clever Media and retain the culture, retain the authenticity that makes them influential?
So I think this is the best case example was right after the merger, sitting in a room, and you've got Smosh, you have Clever, you have Screen Junkies, Home of Honest Trailers. The learnings that you can then share, and I think where Clever was super successful is like, if you watch the VMAs and you went onto YouTube and you search anything, you went to Google, you search for any result, you know, Jennifer Lawrence falls on stage,
Yep.
you're gonna find Clever, right? But
Yeah.
Clever's original program, I think, developed from the merger on, and now is Thrive, where their style channel has millions of subscribers. There are other channels just growing in these originals from the shared learnings from some of our other channels as well.
Okay, thanks. Ilana.
Hi, I'm Alana. I head up M6 North America, which is a full-service media planning and buying agency, and we're a joint venture between Group M and an integrated marketing and creative agency called the AM Partnership.
So Holden and Jocelyn represent the influencer end of the spectrum. You would represent the media end of the center of the spectrum, maybe.
Right, right. So
Okay.
we've been doing kind of influencer marketing as part of our overarching offering since we launched here in New York several years ago. And I think it's, you know, intrinsic to what we do. If you think about today's marketplace, if you think about the continuous fragmentation of channels and platforms and increasing, you know, people's diminishing attention span, and the fact that we really need to be helping our clients and the brands engage better with consumers.
Great. Now, you partnered with Paul on a project. So, Paul,
Yes,
I'm
we
going to
do.
ask you to introduce yourself next.
Hi, everybody. My name's Paul Rand, and I lead an organization called Zocalo Group, which is part of Omnicom. And we merged, speaking of mergers, about a year ago with another Omnicom company called Critical Mass. We started Zocalo, I guess, my goodness, about 9 years ago, and somewhat before the days of a whole influencer gamut. And we started a program called Influencer Relation Management. And at that point, it really was expert influencers, and that the ability was they were not going to be paid, but they were going to be influenced and sharing. And watching the evolution of the industry to the point now where we're going all the way down to having micro-influencers and really an entirely different business model developing out, it means that many of the same principles that existed 10 years ago are there, but the evolution of the industry is really just, I think, getting going, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, today.
Absolutely, yeah. So the #2 beverage brand in the UK is Britvic.
That's correct.
And one of their sub-brands is Fruit Shoots. And so you, I think you collaborated on a project where there was an influential mom blogger in Texas that kind of held a wintertime party in the summer using the Fruit Shoots product in clever ways. And so if you're a brand, if you work for a brand in the audience, who does what in that relationship?
You want me to start?
Go for it.
So this is a really exciting brand. I think they're actually #1 in the UK, but
Okay.
we're
Thanks to
it's been-
this
okay.
wintertime party.
It's
Queen's
been
grandchildren drink it.
yes, they do. So it's been really fun to help introduce Fruit Shoot and new brand into the U.S. market. And essentially what we've done is thought about it within a more holistic, overarching strategy. So the influencer piece of it was very much driven by working closely with Paul's team in terms of generated insights and data from a whole slew of deterministic and programmatic information on, you know, who should we be talking to, and working together to help define the channels and the roles of the channels, and then ultimately specifying who who those influencers are. So that's kind of what we've done conclusively together, and it's been a very synergistic approach, I think, between the teams. I think your team has been very involved in, more of the digital strategy, holistic strategy as it relates to the full experience, and then we've been taking that and thinking about full media and creative activation on the back of that.
That's good because we both think about it the same way.
Good. I was hoping we could get a fight going here.
It's also interesting, and I think we could always talk about kind of the paid components and other elements of influencers. I think this is a brand coming over to the States, competes with Capri Sun, Kool-Aid, or other brands. And I think what's really important in getting any kind of a strategy going is really understanding and doing an intense listening exercise and understanding who's talking about these brands, what are they talking about, what do they like about these brands. And as you're formalizing your strategy, and you're getting an insight that's going to hopefully drive your creative process, but also hopefully giving you a good sense of direction, that if we're going to have certain messages that we want our influencers to share, then let's try to point them in the right direction, because there's 20 different ways you could go when you're introducing a new brand into the market. Having the insight to be able to really pin that down and understand what you should be focusing on, what people are searching for, is a really, really important component.
Great, thank you. Jim, you've been very patient.
I'm just waiting for my chance.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Jim Scott. I'm with founder of an agency in Minneapolis called Mono. Oddly, I feel a little bit like the elder statesman here for some strange reason. We started the agency literally in an attic, three of us, in 2003, which makes us kind of a dinosaur in some ways. But Joe had asked us earlier as we're preparing for this, like, how did it happen to you? How did you become an influencer marketing? And I had to think about the question. So whenever you have a question, you go to Urban Dictionary, right? That's the starting point. And I looked up Darwinism, and it turns out that I'm here because I didn't want to be eliminated from the gene pool. Creative agencies have had a tool set for years, and we left Fallon and other big agencies in Minneapolis, and we had our tool set, and we launched, and we were doing massive TV, big print endeavors for significant brands. USA Network, we developed a Characters Welcome. Target, we do a ton of TV. But we evolved. We walked out of the water like the frogs did and said, you know what, there's got to be this other channel. We have to pay attention to it. So as a creative agency, we spent a lot of time in the traditional world. We generate a lot of television. We work with a lot of brands like Pepsi and Target and others. But we have found that it's absolutely imperative that we remain in this conversation because brands are meandering at times, and our work is very relevant to make them focus on the right things.
Thanks, Jim. Paul, we're going to start with you, okay? I think one of the first things I'd like to do is let's define what is influencer marketing and it's kind of a multi-part question. What's influencer marketing? What's an influencer? And how is influencer marketing different from, say, having Michael Jordan wear your sneakers or drink your beverage?
There's a real evolution, I think, to what influencer marketing is. Again, as I mentioned, I think early on, pre-social media, it really was expert influencers. Who is that person that is going to be interviewed by the media, who's going to be writing white papers, who's going to be doing research and doing other things that come out of that. Today, of course, what's happening with the reach is that we have whole new realms of influencers, and you can call them all sorts of different levels. But it's really evolving to the point where you're having, it's not a celebrity. As a matter of fact, in research that we did, we oftentimes found that celebrities, and overwhelmingly, by the way, the idea is we know that over 90% of all consumers will tell you is that the reason they buy a product or a service is because someone they know or trust, underlying trust, actually recommends it to them. The number one purchase decision behavior. So that idea of how do you build that familiarity that we're talking about is a really important part of this. So an influencer today is somebody that has actually built up enough of an audience, small or large, that their word is actually taken as credible and can follow other people into it. We're going through different evolutions, and we'll talk about size and other things. There is no one perfect influencer because we have so many different types of categories. So the ability to really understand who's listening to who, what are they paying attention to, who's influencing other types of content is really a key criteria of putting together a program using influencer marketing that's going to be effective.
Yeah. And Alana, if I trust Michael Jordan, though, how is he different from Jocelyn?
Yeah, I mean, I think celebrity endorsements are great for awareness, but if you're looking to generate real interest in brand preference, then you need to be engaging on a completely different level with relevance and meaning. So it's going beyond aspirational drivers and thinking about cultural relevance. There was a eMarketer report recently that stated that I think 68% of people's purchase decisions are based on their friends and family, and then 58% are on anyone else in their social network. So that in and of itself says how important it is to be connecting on a completely different level than that. So, what Paul was saying, influencer marketing is key in terms of identifying and then activating an individual who can sway people's brand preferences, purchase decisions, loyalty to a broader audience.
There's an authenticity that's very different, I think. Okay. Jim, I'm going to switch gears on you and ask a different question. So, I know. So, I know KPIs differ from brand to brand, from campaign to campaign, from awareness to consideration to purchase and loyalty. How do you know what to measure? How do you decide that?
I think it depends, honestly. That's like the panelist out answer, right? Like I'm going to cover the whole gamut. It depends. But I truly think it matters what you're after. So in one instance, a number of years ago, we were working on a project for Virgin, trying to raise awareness around teenage homelessness, try to generate donations, trying to get people to help that cause. And in that instance, reach was incredibly important to us. It was one of the key KPIs. Will our message reach enough, and ultimately millennials, will reach enough for those folks?
Yeah.
I can understand it. I know exactly what I got to get out there. It's a simple message. It was a pledge kind of initiative. It was super easy. That was our key KPI, to reach people. We also have worked in the space where we're trying to really redefine and transform a brand. So Sperry Topsider is a client of ours, and we had to take them, and I'll give you the shorthand on the brief, which was from back of the boat to the front of the boat. They were sitting back. It was a Ralph Lauren wannabe brand. We wanted to push them closer to the outdoors, closer to the action. We needed influencers that were relevant to folks. So relevance, engagement, became really critical for us. So it was less about reach. So a number of the people that we found and brought in, and the influencers that we ultimately brought in the campaign, they frankly didn't have a great reach, and our clients struggled with that quite a bit. But we said, these are the people you want talking about it, and in particular at this moment when you're trying to change what that brand stands for. So to us, it varies depending on what we're after.
And then, Alana, you have written a lot and spoken a lot about using technology and data to target messages, and I would assume to target influencer messages. When is reach really important, and when is reach unimportant?
Yeah, I think it goes back to just your generic traditional comms planning framework and thinking about the funnel, right? So thinking about everything from the awareness level through to consideration and sales. So the influencer marketing aspect of that kind of sits directly within. If you're thinking about brand ambassadors, then it's the reach and the awareness. If it's a top tier influencers, it's more about looking at generating content and buzz, and then you have engagement influencers driving clicks or voucher downloads or competition entries, and then ultimately your super fans, and that's where I think everyone wants to get to in driving sales, and really looking at the impact that each influencer has on that sales, which I think is really hard to do. I don't know if anyone here is doing that consistently. It's, to have those tracking codes and promo codes in place all the time. Is anyone doing that? I'll take you for a drink. I'd love to learn how we do that better.
Holden and Jocelyn, do you have a different point of view on any of this?
Yeah, I think some of the things that we look at is from the beginning of a campaign is trying to identify really what those are, because sometimes you get it's awareness, or we want people to check out this video that we created, our creative agency's making it, we want to drive people here. And it's the selection process that you mentioned, Jim, is it's everything, right? It is putting, just because an influencer has maybe 5 million subscribers, right? It doesn't mean that's going to make sense if you're wanting them to. And they may be in sketch comedy, and you're trying to get them to go point to a video that's about some product that doesn't really relate. So it may be good for awareness that 5 million subscribers to this channel may see it, but that's not really going to convert in the terms of people are going to be that's pretty random. So we look at a lot of times, we say, what is the actual like to dislike ratio? What are the comments? And what are people talking about? Because if you haven't truly had any dialogue and conversation within the thread, especially on YouTube, but Instagram as well, it's you're not really moving the needle there. You're not getting that discussion. And the followers and the subscribers, those are the people you're trying to reach. So if you're not creating the dialogue amongst them, we look at that as that's not as successful as it could have been, even if it's negative. So sometimes people look at it as like, wow, there's a lot of negative comments. We've done this with a Scion thing that we did for Screen Junkies, and you look at it as like, that could have been a disaster if you looked at it one way, but it's also like, how many people right now are talking about your brand?
Right.
You're in that conversation, right? You're in the dialogue, and you get people that are defending your brand as part of that. So I think dialogue is everything there.
Have you ever had a case where a brand comes to you and they say, we're looking for this KPI and we really are interested in this influencer, where you've said, that's not the right one for you. Let me tell you who's the right one for you.
We have, and we've done that for a couple of reasons. One is like, you're working with somebody who's not going to be able to deliver what you want.
Yep.
So you get that, the conversation always comes up as like, I want the authentic voice, but I want them to say this, this, this. Yeah. And it's like, well, and I think that's a part of the learning process, is like, how do you adapt that and say, look, they're not going to be right, but let me tell you, these guys can be right.
Yeah.
It's also format. So like, taking the traditional like branded integration that you would get, or celebrity endorsement, and saying, if you do it a little bit differently and you let them do it the way that they do it, the style that they do it, you're going to see the value there. So it's
great.
It's hard, but
okay.
we've done it.
So Paul, we're talking about key performance indicators, and one of the questions that often comes up in discussions about influencer marketing is, what kind of performance can you expect from the influencer? What do you expect going into that relationship? What do you think they ought to do for you?
You know, at this point, there are certain things that I'm sure Holden can talk about that are contractually obliged if you are bringing on different influencers into the mix. And that oftentimes is something that gets negotiated up front. But oftentimes it's not only the amount of content they're creating, it is what they're going to be sharing, if they're going to be coming to events, if they're going to be producing and collaborating with the brand on different things. All of these things can be specified out. And I think there are some campaigns where, for example, we'll do some with like a major hotel chain where we have just selected 10 leading influencers to drive an entire global program. And the demands on those influencers are really pretty high. Very involved, very collaborative, very involved in content creation, very involved in feedback. And then there's others where it's a very limited, let's write a blog post and we're done with it. Yeah. And so I think it really just depends. I have found repeatedly that there are certainly those influencers that you work with, and I think to this point of finding those that really are right. And if there is a personal, genuine passion that the influencer has toward the product or the service, if it's somebody that loves travel and they have a chance to get a lot of award points for doing something, they'll probably go well above and beyond what was contractually obliged just because they're genuinely interested in the brand. And that really becomes part of the screening that can end up becoming very, very important.
Yep. Jocelyn, you have a reputation as an influencer that does everything, and just willing to do everything, and except sell your soul. So that was from the back in 2008 when you started in a garage. That was your reputation. Why is that? What made you decide or believe that you had to be that kind of a influencer?
Well, to be honest, at the time, it was kind of the only choice I had. I was, doing a lot of hosting and producing at the time, and I was very green, so digital was really where I was getting hired, thank God. But there was a point in time where there was a turning point where there was two roads diverged, and I could have gone down the TV route, but I really, really believed in digital and believed that it was, as it is becoming, the way of the future. And I aspects of content creation, very passionate about development, as well as producing and seeing a project all the way through. There's nothing more exciting than working on a project, whether it's a campaign or just a project that we're already doing at Clever, and being able to say I was involved from inception all the way through posting that last tweet. So it's very rewarding and very exciting. And also, if you enjoy the creative process, it wouldn't probably be an option to do it at this level in traditional media.
Yeah. Besides the obvious things like on-camera murders and things like that, is there anything you wouldn't do, or that you've said no to?
There was recently a campaign that was kind of up for discussion, and it was talking about one of the ideas that was thrown out was so maybe you could pretend you're going on spring break to Cabo and you're just gonna hook up with a bunch of people. And I was like, meh, I don't think that's really my brand. I'm sorry, I'm sure you could find someone to do that. But there's lines drawn in the sand for everyone, but the great thing about working at Defy and with the brands that we do work with is that it really is a collaborative process between the creators and RIM team and the agencies and the brands. So there's usually a way to find a way to make it happen, and that's an exciting challenge.
Great, thanks. It's amazing how quickly time is flying here. So we're almost running out of time, and we're getting to the point where we're going to see if the audience has questions. Who knows they have a question right now? One. So there's just one so far, so we have a luxury of a little bit of time, I think. Good. Okay. We'll let you volunteer to take this one on, but have you ever had an influencer campaign or engagement go south on you? And what did you do?
I'll go right out.
All right, good.
Well, it hasn't gone south, not yet, but, it's right in front of us. And I was mentioning this to Jocelyn a moment ago. We're working with a client. It's a women's brand, so I'll try not to tell you all about it because I have a whole women-focused team working on it, and they'll tell me to shut up before I start. But I can tell you our problem. We came out, we're shooting in New York, we had doing a series of videos, contents, bringing the brand to life. We have a full advertising campaign. This is the texture of bringing that idea to life. And 2 days before shooting, our influencer bowed out. They were busy, they had other plans. I mean, it's the unpredictability of it all. So within 2 days, we found someone to step in, and it's Sarah Bareilles. And it's super awesome. And part of the reason she did it is because of the strength of the idea. She's really into it, and involves a young girls rock camp, and she shows up and she helps them through, and we're going to license her music. She's a true influencer. But the reason I say it's gone south is what we didn't do was panic, because I think in the moment, especially with the clients, there's a lot at stake here. The clients, the pressure's ramping up. Shit's hitting the fan. Like, what are we going to do now? We're already on set. We've already got location. We've already got all of the talent except for one. I mean, what do you do? And so I guess what I would say is when it goes to that place, now more than probably ever, the ability to solve in real time is like right there. So what do? You make lemon out of lemonades, and I think we got lemonade and vodka and the whole 9 yards with Sarah. But at some point, we all have to realize that in today you can solve that very quickly without hitting the panic, pull the cord, what's the cancellation fees, let's get out of town. It's like, no, let's make some phone calls. Who else would be good? That's where we went when something goes south.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Come on, Holden, don't hold back. Let's go.
Every day, I'm just kidding.
So we had one that was, we had basically a list that we started with maybe 50 people that it's a female brand that wanted to work with. And we had to whittle that list down. So I think in the end that actually saved us, because we got to the point where we got into execution and we had 3 different influencers, all different types of backgrounds that fit the different segments they were looking to go after. So each of these influencers were building concepts in their own voices. And we had a client who kind of came in and was like, no, I specifically want them to do this. I don't like the treatment. And it came in at the very last minute. And I think the learning point, and the thing I always communicate in a meeting is like, you need one to understand what you want going into it. So we actually now have a questionnaire that we give every single agency. It's like, answer all of these questions. The tone, what do you want them to say? What do you want them to do? It helps us to kind of whittle in who we choose. Because this came down to, and I think was mind-blowing to some people, it's like influencers will walk away. Doesn't matter if it's a 6 or 7-figure deal, they'll walk away. And it's just the demand that they get for deals and other opportunities. It's not in their best interest. So having that plan to say, look, you're going to have to that point is like, if you have alternates, you have other things you can do. If you understand that going in, it's going to make for a much better resolve, because we were in a pretty bad spot with these guys.
Yeah. So you want the authenticity of an unscripted experience, but you want to make sure that all the expectations are laid out pretty clearly before you go into that.
There's a lot of sticking points, exactly.
Yeah. Jocelyn, any disasters on set that happened to you that turned out to be beneficial in the end?
Yes, we things are always going wrong, but that's just production in general. I think when it comes down to influencers, we will have brands that come to us and are like, we want to do this program for this brand, and we want you to insert an influencer who has 1 million subscribers on YouTube or whatnot. And the interesting thing for us that we've seen at the end of the day is that a lot of times adding these outside influencers who are not already a part of our Clever team, which all of our talent in-house are influencers in and of themselves, as well as Clever being an influencer, is that the outsiders that come in don't necessarily always add a lot of value. You don't see comments in the comment section or, people tuning in just to see that person. So it's less about, disastrous things happening with the influencers that come to work with us on our programming, and more about, are they actually adding value? And that comes down to it being really important to us when a brand comes to us and wants to add someone into our team, is that, we'll go to lunch with them before and hang out so that we can get that chemistry going, see if it's a good fit, because viewers are very smart, and inauthentic programming, especially when it's branded, they see right through it every single time. And that's why the series that we launched, Beauty Trippin', with Nair as our launch partner, was so amazing, because we brought in an outside influencer who we already had a friendship with, and the audience really reacted so well to it.
Is this the one where you're all removing upper lip
Listen,
hair?
I
in the
waxed
car
my mustache in an SUV, and all the ladies out there who don't think they have one are lying to themselves. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we did that, and it was so organic, so authentic. Nair really let us do what we do, and the comment section was awesome. All of the girls, and maybe boys too, in the comment section being like, oh my gosh, I totally relate. I have a mustache too, and I can't wait to use Nair strips to wax it in my car. And it was just such a great integration and such a great launch partner. They trusted us to just do what we do and make the kind of content we do, and the outcome was incredible.
Thank you. I think we're going to take a pause now and open it up for questions from the audience. And I know that you had one, so we'll let you start out. Do you mind telling us your name and whether you're from an agency or what your background is, a brand?
Hi, my name is Jay Kuo. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at The Social Edge, and we have a number of influencers under our umbrella, mostly on Facebook. It includes George Takei. And my question actually talks about, I want to ask a little bit, drill down on this question of authenticity and what do you do with brands that come to you. We struggle daily with the Facebook algorithm, and I've noticed that whenever we attempt to publish something that is remotely commercial, our reach on a post can be squashed down to like single-digit percentages versus other things that we post. And of course, we want to be able to set the expectation of the marketers, of the brands that come and say, look, what you're trying to do is probably not going to work because of the way Facebook will punish this. So you should expect to have to spend money to boost this.
Right.
But the difference for us is often huge. Like a comparable video. Sometimes we'll get 100,000 people, but we did one yesterday and it got 14 million. So there's a huge difference, and it all comes down to in those first initial moments. We think Facebook is somehow figuring out whether this is, you should be paying for this, or whether it's going to deliver it organically and free.
Now, Alana, you might be a good one to talk about this. Do you have any views on the Facebook algorithm and how the audience can game it?
Yeah, I think in terms of the actual management of that, I'm not in the intrinsic weeds, but when it comes to trying to blow that up, I think it goes back to thinking about the numbers versus the actual engagement base of those fans, and just making sure that you're not only looking at the numbers. I think we'd all love Jocelyn's relevant to each of our brands and categories, but we're not just looking at the volume and the reach. We're thinking about the engagement base, which is more important for us.
So how would you respond? I mean, how would you guide expectations then? I mean, if you were an influencer and you knew this, like I want to be able to say that to marketers and say, like, you don't just look at the reach and the numbers. because they're not. If you're doing a fairly commercial post, you're not going to get the huge reach.
Right.
They're gonna the algorithm is smarter than you always.
Right, and so again, I think that goes back to just traditional marketing strategies and whether you're looking at one-off campaign objective versus a longer-term brand strategy, because I think it's really, really important. You know, short-term, yes, I think the reach is important. You want to see that spike because right after that campaign, you're going to see a drop-off. But what we've been getting into is thinking less about that massive volume and getting in there with the right influencers that we continue to nurture and grow along the way. For example, Swatch is a brand that we've started working with. They have a new brand, Flick Flack, which is like an educational watch that we're trying to get out there and get moms to know about, which they don't unless they go into the store. So, you know, we're finding the right moms. We're working with Jessica Shiba. I don't know if you guys know her, and getting her to post about her kids wearing the watches and whatnot. And it's continuing to grow. Like, she's not tiny, but she's not a Jocelyn yet. So I think it's about thinking, it's about the longer term game plan, about the brand and getting it right over longer duration as opposed to, you know, over a day or two. I know that's just my.
Yeah, I also kind of think the idea is you start learning over time. We have a client that is, it's an Arauco brand that's involved in teeth whitening, and all of a sudden Facebook decided anything dealing with teeth whitening wasn't acceptable. It's like, well, where did that come from? And so I think part of this is you start learning, but if you really get into it and there's a certain amount of reach that you need to commit to, well, you put money behind it, which is, of course, what the element is that Facebook's trying to drive you to. I think what you're also finding, though, it is part of that organic reach comes out of that idea when people are commenting or sharing that information, they're passing it along with recommendations. That's the kind of thing now as they've reorganized the news feed. That actually goes higher in the news feed than it used to. And so Facebook is getting more credibility to what your friends and family share. So I think it's really understanding all these different elements and trying to tie them together. But when you need that reach, chances are you're going to probably have to pay for it. And if you're going to get a 14 million video, God bless it. It's a wonderful. It's like a client coming and saying, give me a viral video, right?
Are there any other questions from the audience? No? No? So for the panel, is there any? Oh, I'm sorry, there is. Sorry.
Sorry, Joe. Hi, I'm Liberty.
Hi, Liberty.
Liberty Interactive Marketing. Just a question kind of across the panel, influencers and media side, influencer management. How does that collaborative process come together? I know Joe touched on this as far as setting expectations with the influencers, but you know, what is that? And I know that this is like, well, it depends, right? I know that there's going to be that answer, but overall, like, what is that really high level? How does that collaborative process come together? Who gets involved? What does that team look like? And what's the lead time and duration to determining that?
You want to talk about Britvic as an example, since we're here?
Maybe as a starting point, you know, it all starts off like many good things by understanding very clearly what the objectives are of the client. Is it awareness? Is it reach? Is it conversion? Is it trial? Whatever the case may be. And then doing, at least to us, enough research and insight to truly understand what's the market need, what people are talking about, what are they going to share about, where can this brand end up playing and making a difference. And from there ought to come a really good, tight, creative brief. And then if everybody can get aligned on what that creative brief is, what we're trying to accomplish, what the goals are for the program and other elements, that we have found tends to get everybody from the clients to our team to the media team kind of lined up and pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's down to the logistics of having connects with everybody sitting around the table. So for the what we need to do and who we need to be talking to, the fact that we wanted to be getting moms to think about packing a fruit shoot for their kids' lunch the next day, which is what I should have done last night because I was up at 10 not knowing what to pack. But so it was, you know, getting that ideation and thinking about what is the way in which we want to be going to market. And then we sat with, my team was talking to the media owners and site content partners. We worked closely with Meredith, so we brought Meredith to the table and thought about what they could be bringing. And we launched a whole slew of, you know, content. You know, go to hashtag Made for Adventure. You can see some of the work there. And then, you know, going back and forth in terms of figuring out how to amplify and fuel that further with the influencers that we were working with, the paid programs as well as on our own channels.
Yeah, and I would just add to it too. I think from a creative perspective, I think it's really important to understand what's important to those influencers because the collaboration kind of has to revolve around that. A small example for our Sperry client, we were sending travelers out into the world to kind of live this brand idea that we had talked about, and we contacted Shaun White's younger sister because we didn't have enough money for Shaun White. But she's cool.
She's not born yet, but
yeah, you know, she's cool. She's got followers and kind of hip. And we found out that she had begun this journey to try to figure out where her ancestors came from. And there's a lineage into Ireland. And we had this travel idea. So we're like, how about if we send her to Ireland? Wouldn't she be into that? And the collaboration began there because it was something she wanted to do. So, you know, in addition to, you know, the process and making sure alignment is there, I think you really have to find something that these influencers like really dig, and that becomes the collaboration point. So it was easy from that point on because we could all agree on that's cool, let's do that, let's send her there. And if her brother wants to come along, that's cool too. But it was mostly about her.
That's great. Ross, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Jocelyn, yesterday we featured as an opening to Oma Video, we talked about your Nair campaign that you just described a little bit on stage here, and it was a terrific example of influencer marketing. But what I'm wondering is the deliverables outside of doing an integration or something like the Nair campaign. What are some of the how is that managed by you on the influencer side? Like what the deliverables are? Are you expected to be on like every social channel all the time, responding to all the comments, and
thankfully,
or do you negotiate that down or something?
I mean, thankfully, obviously, on both clever as a follow through. Agree to always. But on the flip side, we also love to work with brands like Nair that are authentic to our brand. So yes, we're going above and beyond. We're going into the comment section and responding personally, whether it's from my own personal account or the I use this, I do this, because engaging with our so important. Beyond that, when you're talking about all of the social components of the campaign, those are all set up ahead of time, whether it's a teaser video on Instagram or however many tweets we're going to send out. We had an outside influencer in that campaign as well. She loved it. She had so much fun. We did the wax strips in the car. We went parasailing, and we also went to modeling school. Dream come true. And she loved it so much that she was excited to be posting on her socials. And I think that really comes across. And that's even more important, the authenticity and excitement from the posts, I think, than, oh, maybe can we add another one? I think one really powerful one is cooler and better than like 20 tweets. Mm-hmm. You know, that's my personal opinion, at least.
Okay, great, thanks.
Ross, how much time do we have?
Joe, you've probably got like 5 more minutes if you wanted to ask some more questions.
Yeah, I had a special question for you, Jocelyn, if you don't mind. Well, I actually have 2. So the cameras go off, you get out of the car. Those Nair strips go in your pocketbook?
I actually do have them at home.
Okay, good.
I fully do use them. I'm not even making it up.
I believe.
You're all welcome. No one wants to see me with a beard.
So there was a point in your life where you're in a garage, you're an individual, you have a passion, maybe a mission, a purpose, not an audience. You're not an influencer yet. For all the brands out there that are hiring influencers to connect with audiences who sometimes aspire to become influencers themselves, how do they do it?
For the brands that want to become
for the brands that want to do it. How do they model their behavior after yours?
Well, I think it's really challenging. I think just coming from a garage, very humble beginnings, especially when you're talking about resources, AKA money, everything you're doing is really to reach an audience and to grow an audience authentically. And we never had the luxury of having a ton of money. And I think what I've seen in the past few years, especially with bigger companies or brands jumping into YouTube or just social media in general, is that the idea of like, oh, we have a bunch of money, like let's just hire this random famous person that like will never talk about our brand unless we pay them to, and let's just like splash money all over the internet. That doesn't work. I think it's far more powerful to hire someone like Shaun White's little sister, as random as that sounds, because it makes sense, and she has this audience that's really engaging with her. That said, a brand like Clever, where we are a brand in and of ourselves, but then we have all of these influencers working for our brand, I think that is what people really connect with. When I think about how I experience social media, I really enjoy human connection. So like Ellen DeGeneres, she has one of the biggest shows on TV, but when I think about that show, I think about her. She also is selling pillows at Bed Bath & Beyond. So her brand is so far and so wide. And when I go to buy that pillow, I'm like, I wonder if Ellen's sleeping on this too. So I think really finding human beings that make sense to put in front of your brand is one of the most powerful things you can do. And sometimes, you know, I'm sure, I know these influencers are getting paid a lot of money. It's kind of wild, but not necessarily hiring like the Michael Jordans, instead thinking outside of the box.
Thank you. Ilana?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think we've talked a lot today about consumers and not the B2B sect, which I think is a little different. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think what in some of the research that we've been doing is people looking for experts in the field for, you know, a better understanding of what they should be doing. So I think it's a little different when you think about B2P, you know, and it's harder. You know, we do work for BNY Mellon and, you know, using their CEO, Jared Hessel, as an influencer is key. We're launching a new brand called Arconic for Alcoa, and we're tapping into futurists, but working along with the engineers at Alcoa to make that connection. So it's a little different in the B2B space, I just want to mention.
Yeah. You know, the reason I ask is because you know, we work with some similar clients like Target and Microsoft or Starbucks, and they're all very influential. But there are times when, you know, I might be sitting with a person who's an expert in the internet security space at Microsoft, who's a former FBI agent, who's just knows things that nobody else on earth knows. And we're looking to get an influencer to kind of speak for that person. There are times when they just think, man, I would listen to anything you told me. If we could just convince you to do it yourself, man, I would follow you into hell. You know,
I think the point Alana's making, particularly on the B2B side, it ends up being an incredibly different influencer, and I think the audience is, for example, everybody in this room is here because they have an interest in social media or influencer marketing.
Yeah.
You're not here having to be talked into coming and listening. You're here assuming that you're going to end up gaining some new information, and you're going to take that and share it. So I think that idea on the B2B side, which I think is really important, oftentimes, and in the best cases, you're doing it with in-house resources, i.e. at Microsoft, but whereas you may never get a client on the B2B side to say, I'm going to write you a testimonial, if you put on a client roundtable, that you filmed it, you had questions, those clients are talking about how productive it is, and then you're doing placements with that type of content, you're getting the impact of a really great B2B influencer campaign on top of it all. You know, one question before we do close out, and I think the element around what we're seeing on disclosure is taking on a whole new level of relevance and importance as well. And I think for years ago, I was the chairman of the board for WOMA, the Word of Mouth Marketing Association, and we started working with the FTC. And I think today what we're finding is you're hard pressed to find a post or a comment from an influencer that doesn't have some type of a hashtag on it. So I think having that sensitivity to it, but I think also the fears of this is going to be inauthentic don't seem to be materializing. I think there's a realization, I get it, and let's just make sure that we're doing it as effectively as we need to be.
That's a great point.
Great. Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you, panel. It was great. It was terrific. Thanks, guys. So while they're coming off the stage,
themselves. So really, you know, the first step of this is, okay, I'm an influencer, now what? And I think that this is a good time to really have Harris talk about kind of, you know, understanding he was an influencer, now what does he want to do next?
So real quick background, I used to work at Twitter doing influencer marketing. First worked for Niche, which was one of the first influencer networks connecting brands with creators and influencers. We got acquired in February of 2015. And I kind of witnessed the arbitrage and saw the Vine economy grow into what it was or is, and saw just that creators are getting paid a certain amount of money to make mediocre content. And I started taking Snapchat more seriously, started to grow an organic following, had the chance last summer to do some stories for Coca-Cola. It was still very new at the time. Brands were delving into Snapchat. And me and a friend of mine made an ad for Coca-Cola that went in the back to school live story. And when we got the results back, it got 6 million views and had a 54% completion rate, which 3 million people watched all 10 seconds of the ad that I made, which was pretty insane. And we found out it was the highest performing ad in Snapchat's history. And I used my phone while other advertisers were making very high produced content. And that just really showed that if you're creating authentic, organic, native content, that it actually works. So I kind of leveraged my position to leave Twitter and start a serial production. And I got a deal to work with Coca-Cola kind of for the next couple months, and that blossomed, and then was nominated for Snapchat of the Year, only focusing on creating the best stories possible. And that's kind of where I got to.
Yeah, so I think, one takeaway there, and it's actually something that we're doing right now in Santa Monica with Attention, is the idea of, the shelf life of an individual influencer versus the idea of having this kind of production capability or production background and really being able to provide full service as an influencer versus an individual, with a phone. And that's definitely a trend that we're seeing, across different industries, is really looking for influencers to be able to do a little bit more, and the expectations are a little bit higher. But what we get into is, whether it's an influencer or a brand, it's the idea of, as an influencer, you now also have to think about what are your objectives, what do you want to accomplish when working from brands? And I know you mentioned some stats for the Coca-Cola. I don't know if you want to go into a little bit of like what expectations you set when you're working with brands.
So right now, one of our biggest clients is Zillow. We actually just renewed with them, and our deal with them was to do 60 stories over 6 months. And when I was at Twitter, Coca-Cola, they were doing kind of like one-offs with these influencers that were like these Vine stars. And I realized, like, if they do 2 or 3 stories, what is that going to do? They do a shout out, but they're not really developing a relationship with the brand and not thinking about like what about the long term. So with Zillow, we started at 300 opens, and by just consistently creating high caliber content, we got them to 34,000 opens, which is pretty high for a real estate company that I didn't, like, most people don't really know much about, especially on social media. And our objectives were to really just tell the best stories possible. And we worked with Jake Paul and some other influencers, but at our core objective was to tell Zillow's story without making it seem like there's a business objective behind each snap, and to really create content that feels like we're sharing it with the user and not like we're pushing an idea onto them. We do stop motion stories, we do home tours, all of which don't feel like there's a boardroom of people thinking of like, how do we get into their mind and make them love Zillow. We made them love Zillow by loving the content. So,
great. So looking at the next one is, really think about what type of influencer are you? So really having an understanding whether you're a platform expert, or are you an expert in a certain type of lifestyle, or can you do different stunts with action sports that other people can't? Really understanding the type of influencer you are helps to then craft how you're actually going to work with brands. And on the flip side, knowing what type of influencer the person is and understanding the limitations that that person has really helps brands craft their pitch a lot better when reaching out to influencers. Also, when we're developing the creative programs, understanding the types of influencers that we're going after. So obviously, Harris specializes in Snapchat, but there are kind of other areas. Why don't you talk a little bit about, outside of just Snapchat, some of more of the ways that you, for lack of a better term, like hack Snapchat and just create content that you can't see just from the everyday Snapchat user?
So when stories first became popular, I really saw it like as a blank canvas. People were just taking selfies and pictures of their food, but I thought, like, what if I try to make like a scripted like mini film, or try to do a stop motion story? And our goal was to create Snapchat content that lasts forever. So all of our clients, we download our stories, we put music onto them, edit them a little bit, and they can put it on Instagram, they can put it on YouTube. There's a lot of influencers that when a brand comes to them, they're like, okay, this is what I want to do, and they're not really flexible. And the kind of influencer that I want to be, or creator, or an artist that I want to be, is one that's very flexible and versatile. So if a brand says, we want to do home tours, like, can you do that? Yeah, we can do that, and here's how we're going to do it. Very methodical, very meticulous on how we create each piece of content. and just figure out new ways to take advantage of the low-hanging fruit. Like, for example, on Instagram stories, now for Zillow, we will do a Snapchat story, and as we're filming it in real time, we'll take boomerangs, we'll do like hyperlapses, and then we'll edit the snaps and then upload them onto Instagram stories. So kind of killing two birds with one stone just by being conscious of what we're creating.
Right. So one thing, that an influencer has to start asking themselves as more people are investing in it and kind of automated platforms are growing in a number of different areas, how will I differentiate myself? And it's not just when it's the influencer talking, but it's really, the brand is also asking, how are these people differentiated? So we work across, BMW, JBL, Moet and Chandon, a number of different other clients across industries. And one area that we started to look at was like, how do we differentiate? And we categorize it by either, skills, personality, authority, community, or engagement. So you can have all of these. You can be good in certain areas, but really when we're figuring out what's differentiating the person, these are the areas that we look at. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about, when it's you versus someone else, or when a brand is talking about, what makes you unique, how you start to differentiate yourself.
So with everything I do, I always start by saying, like, what can I do that nobody else is doing, and how can I really master that art? So with the stop motion stuff, nobody was doing that. I saw a lot of people doing it on Vine, and I figured out a way to apply that in the Snapchat context. And I like when people, so obviously, for those who use Snapchat know that when you're going through and scrolling through, you have to like see somebody's name and then tap. Where on Instagram, you scroll through, double tap, just keep going. But what I really wanted to do was make sure that whenever somebody sees my name, they're like, okay, like we're ready for this, and they tap in and then start watching. So really building my name up to be something that people are expecting, like a high level of quality content, like HBO or Netflix. You know that what you're watching is at the next level. So just trying to be the best I can be.
And how do you kind of continue to innovate on Snapchat or on other platforms? Are you working with anyone at Snapchat? Is there anyone else that you're working with to kind of figure out what are the ways you can innovate with?
Mm-hmm. So at ACP, I have a producer named Harry Golden who comes from a documentary filmmaking background. And as I continue to push ourselves forward and deep into Snapchat, he's helping us go wide into all video production. So bridging that gap between traditional filmmaking and Snapchat has allowed us to really seek new opportunities and take advantage of some really cool things that people didn't think were possible. So about a month and a half ago, we were sent to Israel to work with this organization called Soccer for Peace that brings together Palestinian and Israeli Jewish kids to break down cultural barriers. And Harry was filming like the ACP documentary, and I was doing like a daily Snapchat vlog, which like doesn't really occur that much. But knowing that anything is possible on Snapchat, we were able to really tell a story that we were kind of like developing with the actual narrative.
Cool. And that kind of ties into, another thing that people have to ask now, or influencers have to ask, what is my content strategy? The same way you'd have to do it as a brand. So if we look at the way that, brands were working with influencers originally, it was a lot around amplification. I have this piece of content that I produced, and I really just need you to help promote it. Then we saw, more about leveraging them as actors. So the idea of having an entire production crew that's owned by the brand and kind of really creating the content, with them as really just a replacement for the actors that they might influencers share it out. Experiencing now is, giving up a little bit more of that creative control, or, in some cases having a little bit more of co-creation. But the idea of really leveraging influencers for their craft rather than for their scale. So obviously, Harris kind of has both, but I just think talking a little bit about the ways that you're working with brands in terms of how approval processes go, and how much creative freedom they're giving you.
So obviously, every single brand is different. Another client of ours is Greats Brand. They're a sneaker company in Brooklyn. And when we sat down and first started talking, they said every other week they do like a new release. So I love hearing what the brand wants to do and kind of like what their current strategy is, and then figure out fun ways to apply that to Snapchat. So for Greats, when they release their sneaker, we'll do a story where we set up the camera or the phone on a tripod, and the box will come into frame and then like kind of the shoes will come out and like take on a life of its own. And so we call that tap to release as they release the shoe. So really depends on what the brand is looking for. With Zillow, I flew out there to Seattle and they gave me a brief on like what they're currently doing and what they're looking to do. And then I went back with a 72 slide deck with 10 different Snapchat serialized ideas. They liked it, and it's just like also evolving with them. I actually like working with brands because they know that they don't know everything, but they know that they have an objective that we need to meet together. So putting our heads together really does make for awesome content.
So just hearing, the word brief, obviously coming from an agency background, that's something our creative teams will get a lot. And one thing that we're trying to really answer is what is going to be the difference between the future of an influencer and what a creative is at our agencies. So maybe you can shed some light kind of how you differ or how you're similar to a typical creative that a brand might be working with.
So I know a lot of people think that Snapchat's like, oh, you just hop on, start like taking selfies on the red carpet or behind the scenes, but we actually sit down and do like a full-fledged storyboard. We have multiple rounds. We'll start with an outline, telling them like what we want to do on Snap 1, Snap 2, Snap 3, and then we'll go and we'll mock up like what the home tour is going to look like, what movements we're going to use, and really make it so that there's like 100% transparency and that there's no surprises when we show up on set. And so that's something that I know that a lot of agencies or creators in Snapchat don't really do, so we try to take advantage of that and give the brand as much as we can up front, because in the end it obviously will pay dividends. So yeah.
Great. And one part of content strategy is also just the idea about having an editorial calendar, which might be something different for an influencer to think about, but another area that we're really working on with the space that we're opening up in Santa Monica is how does an influencer start to have a church and state the same way that any publisher or editorial platform might have? How do we make sure that there's not community revolt, that there's too many promoted posts going out, or that there's transparency? So one thing that we are continuing to explore is the idea of how to keep it authentic, and we really have started to work with influencers on their own editorial calendar, and leaving slots open for branded posts versus where I think a lot of the agents are going right now. Like with any good agent, they want to get their talent parts and roles, so they're really pushing 90 to 100%. Promoted branded posts, because that's where the money is. So why don't you talk a little bit though about knowing, looking at your content, there's obviously a mix of things that you do just because you want to do it and things that are paid. Are you at the point where you do have some type of editorial calendar, or is it really just of the moment?
So one thing I just want to make clear, when I do my work on Snapchat, I don't do it on my channel. Like I don't do my branded content on my channel. I go on the brand's channel and produce for them behind the scenes. So in terms of staying authentic, if I were to do a story on my channel that's clearly branded, clearly being paid for, my followers would know that's not me, it's not my style. So that's one thing that I always keep in mind, and I would never want to do something where I feel uncomfortable, in front of the camera. So, what was your question again? Sorry.
You answer it.
Yeah.
It's basically staying authentic.
Oh, yeah.
And you've gotten to the point of an editorial.
Right. And what I love about Snapchat is that it is so in the moment. Like right now, if I got inspired, there's 2 microphones, how can I make them come to life, or what can I do that's funny with them? Then I'll do that. But I don't really have there have been times where I have planned out a story, like when we were doing the Snapchat movies, or when we've done these posted stop motion stories where we have to actually do a lot of pre-production. But yeah, in terms of editorial calendar for myself, no, but for a brand, it's a must.
So the last thing, how will I prove myself? And that's something that if you're even a brand marketer looking to do influencer marketing, you have to sell in to the C-suite. If you're an agency, you have to sell it into your client. And if you're an influencer, you have to sell it into whoever is hiring you. And one area is, the most efficient way to show ROI now has been to really, connect the networks, to a automated platform. There's obviously hundreds of startups in that space, but what we're finding is mixed in with that is there's a lack of personalization, a lack of authenticity, and oftentimes a lot of kind of bots that come with that. come with those programs. So outside of that, how are you proving ROI outside of just having the networks connected?
Yeah, so for me personally, the best advice I ever got was from Casey Neistat, who told me, he was like, don't worry about views, just focus on telling the best stories possible and create the highest quality content. And by not focusing on views and only focusing on the content, that's allowed me to get exposure. Like, I don't have the biggest following on Snapchat, but I was up for, I say this humbly, I was up for an award with like DJ Khaled and Kylie Jenner only because I've only focused on telling the best stories possible. So if you just focus on that, like, people will find you. We're in the most connected time in the world. So just really focusing on that. And what was the second part you just said before? Oh, proving myself. Or for a brand, like, earned media is the best. Like with Zillow, they've gotten in a couple articles that I was featured in. Sometimes at the end of a good story or even a bad story, we'll say, like, hey guys, can snap us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you guys. And there are people, it's really crazy how people will actually take the time to snap a direct message saying, like, I love how much creativity you put into this. Like, somebody wrote like #Zillow forever. We record all of that, so it's pretty awesome. And then there are people that actually give insightful feedback, like, why don't you try doing this, or why don't you do less of that? Like, we want to see more home tours. We want to see like what celebrity houses look like. So asking for feedback, like, your viewers are your best critics. So.
Great, and I think what we want to do, if there's any time left, is just open it up for any questions. But I know that we had a short amount of time here, but we really want to be able to cover really what's like a framework, whether you're an influencer, brand, or agency, of just how you can turn influencer marketing into something that's actually driving business objectives for you. So we'd love to open up the floor now.
Hello. Oh yeah, I'm back. Great. Thanks, guys. I have a quick question. Maybe it's not that quick. So is most of the work that you do, influencer marketing work that you do, is behind the scenes as like a producer for content for like Zillow and the like? Is any of it kind of overt, like to your users, or not really?
So whenever I do a story for Zillow or for Greats or Soccer for Peace, Red, I'll do it on their channel, and then I'll take my phone and put like Harry's phone or somebody else's phone beneath it, like videotaping it, and kind of do like a sneak peek. And I'll say, if you want to see what I did with Red or what I did with Zillow, go over to their channel and you can watch it there. So
oh, I see. Okay.
Most of the work I do is behind the scenes, but like we've kind of created an aesthetic and a style that, like, as if you're seeing something done a certain way, people could know that it's me that's doing it. There have been times with Zillow where we'll partner up with like Jake Paul, who's a big Viner. We did a home tour with him. He was the talent, like he was the subject, and we were the creators, kind of like how commercials are, like Shaq does Icy Hot, but Shaq's not like directing and producing it himself. Right. He's the subject, he's the topic, and then it's the people that behind the scenes that really create the value in the content.
Well, all right, so when any of your followers find out that you're doing some of this stuff, I mean, you don't get any pushback, or do you, or? No.
People like that. People have been following this process from, like, I used to create, so when the QR code first came out on Snapchat, I immediately took a screenshot and made stickers and put them all around the city, and people started to find me, and I was still creating a lot of content then. So people have seen this evolution from like just regular account manager at Twitter to like actual Snapchat production studio. So the more business I get, the happier they are, actually.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, thanks very much. Any questions here from audience? Anybody? All right, one over here. Actually, two.
Thanks. My name's Paul, come from the agency side. Just particularly working with some big brands, just really a question on what's the quality of the brief. I mean, there was an article that I read a couple of months ago, which was really sort of talking about how influencer marketing could, well, it was the title was "Time to Call Bullshit on Influencer Marketing," and it was just a litany of all the things that had, basically, a lot of effort for little reward, and the ROI thing particularly came through. But no surprise, it kind of ended up on, you've got to know what you're doing when you're going in. So I'd just be interested to hear about the quality of the briefs you're getting from major brands, because so much of it just seems to be, we want to do something in this space, help us.
You're saying the quality of the briefs?
Yeah, just what you would sort of, some advice.
Yeah.
Kind of, what makes a good brief versus a bad brief?
Right. So There's never really been a bad brief. Like Cartier, for example, they knew exactly what they wanted, and they had a shot list for their event. They were opening up like the old like Cartier mansion on Fifth Ave, and I went there and I just like got them all the shots that they wanted and posted it. And so that's obviously an incredible brief because I know I have like an outline of a blueprint. But then for Zillow, they don't really have a brief. They just know they want it. They actually called me and they were like, we want to be top 5 on Snapchat. Like we'll go all in with you, but just tell us like how we have to do it. And so I come and I kind of brief them on what I want to do, and then they will say, okay, we can't do that. We can't do that. Let's definitely do this. Let's do that. So.
Yeah, and to talk about from like the other side is it's 2 parts actually. So one, I think having clear objectives of why you're using influencer marketing, and maybe you don't know that. So the first question is just working with your agency partner to figure that part out, and then understanding, okay, if this is your objective, these are the types of influencers you need to work with, and these are the types of parameters that they typically like to have. So is it something that's involving, a very strict creative brief that you might just give to a creative team, or is it something where you want to keep it a little loose? Because the second part of it is ideally, if you're doing it the right way, you're working with people that really live and breathe either the platform or the category or the space every day. And they've built these highly engaged followers for good reason if you're working with the right ones. And so part of it is you really want to lean into them and borrow their equity in that space and borrow their creativity in that space as well. So there are times when it makes sense to have a very tight brief and a clear understanding. But a lot of times it's just more knowing your objective and giving some guidelines and guardrails, but then really getting the creative ideas back from the influencers and working with them on kind of putting the brand filter on it has been the most effective way we've seen of doing those types of campaigns.
Okay, Harris and Jeremy, thanks very much, you guys. We are out of time, unfortunately, but there is a coffee break right now, so if you have more questions for these guys, maybe they'll stick around for a couple minutes. You want to take them in the back, that'd be great, and then we'll be back here.